Hey, what's up? It's Chris from Brooker Films, and in today's video I'm going to run you through the basics of Adobe After Effects 2018. So let's waste no time and let's jump straight into it. So once we've loaded up After Effects, we're going to be greeted by this window here, and we can either create a new composition from footage or we can create a new composition from scratch. So we're just going to press this button on the left and we're just going to rename our composition to AE, After Effects. Now from here we've got all of these settings, so I'm just going to make sure that our width is 1920 by 1080, we've got square pixels, and our frame rate is 23.976 frames per second. Now if you were shooting a 4K video and you wanted a 4K composition size, then you can change your width and your height right here. If you wanted to lock your aspect ratio to a specific aspect ratio, so let's say we want to have it in 1.78, that's 16 by 9, we could just press this button here, and we can just pull this all the way up and both the width and the height move at the same time. But for this example, we're going to keep it to standard HD. So we're going to keep this by 1920 by 1080. Now, like the frame size, if you wanted to adjust the frame rate, all you would need to do is come down to this box and just adjust it to fit whatever frame rate you wanted. But the typical frame rate is 23.976. So we'll keep it to that. And we're just going to press OK. So that's just going to load up a new window. And from here, we have our timeline down here. So all of our footage, all of our video layers, all of our text, that's all going to sit down here, and we'll make the cuts over here in this box here. This black window here, this is where your video footage will play, and this is where you're going to preview all of your videos. Now your text is up here on the right in character, and if you wanted to create some new text, all you would need to do is scroll across to this bar up here on the left, and the T button, that stands for text. But before I create a new text layer, let me just run you through all of these different settings at the top bar over here. So this is your standard cursor, that's the selection tool. You just make selections with this, pretty standard. This is your hand tool, and that's just going to move your composition around. This is great because it means you can move the composition around to target a specific point without moving any of the video layers. That's great. Next up we have the magnify, that's the zoom tool, so that's just going to zoom into your composition. As you can see, the percentage is changing down here, but for now we'll just fit it back up to 200%. This is your rotation tool, so that's just going to rotate the canvas or rotate the video footage in the canvas. Next up we have camera, that's a 3D untitled camera tool, and if you're editing a project in 3D camera space, then you can use the camera tool to navigate around the 3D space. This is a bit more complicated though, so don't worry about this one to begin with. This one is your pan behind, similar to the other one, don't need to know about that one yet. Now this is your rectangle tool, and this is just going to create some shapes. So if we drag down from that, you'll see that you're presented with a bunch of different options. So we could create a rectangle, we can create an ellipse, we can create a polygon, we can create a star. That all looks great, but for now, let's just create an ellipse just to kind of show you how to use this. So let's hold on to that. And we've got the fill and the stroke size over here. So we can fill this with red. We'll make the stroke, we'll make that blue. And then we can pull up the stroke size to whatever we see fit. So let's just drag across over here, and that's just created a brand new shape. And as you can see, the shape is over here on the timeline here, and all of the settings and everything are down here on the left. Now, if you wanted to create a circle, you don't have to do this by hand and try and create a perfect circle. That's just going to take forever. All we need to do for this is just hold down shift whilst we're dragging the ellipse, and that's just going to create a perfect circle. Same thing applies if you wanted to create a square or a rectangle. Hold down shift and you get yourself a perfect square. If you release shift and draw again, you're going to just get a rectangle, and you can kind of freehand the shape. So moving on from this shape, we have a pen tool, and a pen tool is great for creating custom shapes, or you use the pen tool when you're creating masks or rotoscoping. This is a very useful tool, and you'll need this later down the line. So make sure you know how to use the pen tool. Moving on, we've got the horizontal type tool. However, if we go down, you can see a vertical type tool. And this is just your text. So if we're on the horizontal type tool, just select this black space here, and we can just type whatever we want, and that's just your standard text. Now, if you wanted to edit this text, you'd go over to the character window on the right, and you can change your font here. You can change, obviously, the size and the style of that font. You can adjust the size, if you've got multiple text layers, so let's do some down here. You can adjust the positioning between the layers over here. You've got the kerning over here, so that's the width between each character. Then you can make it bold, you can make it italic, you can put it in all caps, so on, so on. If we go back into that text on the top left, and we go into vertical type tool, then you can create some vertical text, which is pretty cool. But we don't need that for now, so we're just going to delete that from the composition. Here we have a brush tool, and that just gives you the ability to paint over specific video layers, but you do need to do that onto a specific point, so we can't do that right now without creating a new image. Moving on here, we have the clone stamp tool, and that's a bit complicated to begin with, so don't worry about that. We have the eraser tool, again, same thing, it's just going to erase, but you don't really need to know about that. So next up we have the rotoscope tool, and let's say you want to add text behind someone in video. What you would do, you use the rotoscope tool to paint over the person in the foreground, and that's going to separate the person from the background, allowing you to add the text in between each layer. And then lastly, on this menu, we have the puppet pin tool, and this is really useful if you want to animate characters and you want a great character animation. So now that we've got all of those, we can move on and we can have a look roughly at the settings in this top bar here. So if we go straight into composition, we can create a new composition in here. So we just do that by pressing new composition, adjusting all of your settings again like we did at the very beginning. We can adjust our current composition settings here. If we wanted to export this, then we could add it to the render queue by going up to here. And then everything else in this just is a bit too complicated for the time being. So let's now go into layer. So we go into layer, new, and from here we can create some new different items. So we can create a new text layer here. We can create a new solid, so a new solid. We'll bring up this menu here. We can adjust the color of the solid. So let's make this bright orange, adjust the width and the height of this. And that's just going to create this brand new solid over here. If we go back into layer, new, this is a new light, and this is for a 3D scene. So for now, you don't need to worry about this. Camera is a 3D camera. Again, don't need to worry about this for the time being. It's a bit complicated. Now, null object is a really useful thing to know about. Let's create a new null object. And whilst we're at it, let's create a new text sequence so I can show you how the null objects work. So let's just add some text here. And now if we look down here in this bottom left window, we're just going to put the null on the top. So now if you wanted to move both this orange square and the text at the same time and do the same animation, rather than animating each one of them separately and trying to match them up perfectly by eye, you can parent both of these layers to a null object, meaning you only have to animate the null object and everything stuck to the null object will move with the animation. So that sounds complicated. Let me give you a quick example. Let's select both of these layers, that's the orange solid and the gibberish text layer. We're going to use this pick whip tool here. We're going to drag that onto the null object and let go. Now, as you can see in this parent box, we've got null 1 on both of these. That means if we make any changes to the null object, then it's going to make these changes to both of these layers exactly the same. So let's press this arrow here and let's press the arrow next to transform. And that's going to bring up anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Now the anchor point is this point in the middle, and you can change this to wherever you see fit. And the anchor point is where all of these changes below are going to happen. So if we adjust the anchor point to the very end of the frame, and then if we go down and adjust the rotation, the video here will rotate from this anchor point. So there you go, you'll see that perfectly moving there. But if we move this back into the center, so the anchor point is right now in the center again, and we rotate, now everything is going to rotate around this specific point here. Moving on, we've got position, and like it sounds, this is just the positioning of everything. Scale, again, that's just the size of everything. Rotation, we've just shown you that's going to be rotating. And then the opacity is basically the hardness of the video clips. Now, a null object is naturally invisible. You won't ever see a null object, so that is naturally set to 0%. So now if we go into the text layer and press transform and we pull down on the opacity, you'll see that this is disappearing and reappearing. Now this is great if you wanted to fade the title in at the start of a project or a fade out at the end of a project or whatever. This is a super creative tool. Now go back into layer, go back up to new, and we've got a new shape layer. So again, that is like our square, our rectangle, our ellipse and everything. And then below that, we've got adjustment layer. Now an adjustment layer, we pull that up to the very top. If we make a change to an adjustment layer regarding color correction or anything like that, then the adjustment layer will add the changes to every layer below that. So it kind of works in the same way that a null object works for movement, but an adjustment layer works for color correction and like color grading and all those different types of things. So let's go up to our effects tab. So we're going to go up to character, and on this arrow next to character will reveal effects and presets. So we'll go into effects and presets, and that's going to load up all of these different effects. Now, I'm not going to run through all of these in today's video because I don't want this video to be like half an hour long. So feel free to explore all of these different menus and find all of these amazing effects. But just to quickly show you an example of this adjustment layer, I'm going to go into color correction, and let's find some tint. So we'll just drag tint on top of the adjustment layer. And now there you go. Now, as you can see, this tint has made this image black and white. And that's just added this to the adjustment layer. I haven't actually made the orange image black and white. I've made the adjustment layer black and white. If we pull this adjustment layer below the orange layer, it goes back to orange. And that's because only the adjustment layer has these effects made to it. Now let's go back over to the effects and presets tab, and I'm going to show you just a few of these basic settings that you might need to know about. So audio has all of your audio effects, blurring and sharpen, that's blurring. Channel, there's just some random settings in there. Cinema 4D, that's for 3D images, but that's another software, so don't worry about Cinema 4D. Color correction, we've just seen, that's our color correction and our color grading. Distort is quite self-explanatory, that's just distortion. Expression controls is a bit complicated for now, so don't worry about it. Generate, that's just going to generate a few different things for us. So we've got like some stroke effects, that's drawing. We've got lens flares. We've got circles, that's going to generate a circle. We've got checkerboards. There's loads of different things we can generate in here. We've got the immersive video. That's for VR, so don't worry about that for now. And now we've got keying, and this is for green screen and blue screen. So if we were to have a green screen video in here, I would drop key light onto that, and that's just going to delete the blue or the green from a green screen video, meaning that we can add videos behind that. This is typically what you'll see on the news or the weather. Green screen and blue screen is a super awesome effect, and keying is how you would do that. Noise and grain allows you to add noise and grain to your image, so we'll drag noise onto our adjustment layer and we'll pull that up, and as you can see, that's created some noise. We'll delete that for now. Obsolete are the old effects, but they're still awesome, they're still there, so typically I like to use basic 3D to rotate or like flip an image on itself. Color key, again, is keying. Fast blur is blurring. The rest you can kind of figure out for yourself. Perspective, again, that's just like some more different things you can find out about. Simulation, stylized, synthetic aperture, text is more text. Text is actually quite cool because you can get some text animations here. So let's go into timecode. And now from here, if we scroll through, the timecode has created an automatic like timecode, time stopwatch type thing, which is pretty cool. And we've got echo effects, we've got pixel motion blur, time warp, we've got loads of different effects in there. Transition, now these are like pre-made transitions. Let's add some Venetian blinds. Transition complete, there you go. That's just going to create some Venetian blind transitions for you. Now, if you wanted to add this transition into your effect, let's scroll back to the beginning. And now in transition completion, we're going to press this time watch, this stopwatch here. We're going to scroll across to, let's say, 2 seconds on our video. And now we'll progress this up to 100%. And this is just the basics of keyframe animation. I've created a keyframe at 0 seconds at 0%. Scrolled across to 2 seconds, and I've progressed that onto 100% and created another keyframe in there. Now, if we go into the adjustment layer, you'll see that there's these 2 points here, and these are our keyframes. So let's go into effects, let's go into Venetian blinds, and these are our effects here. So if we wanted to speed this up, all we would need to do is drag this second keyframe all the way up to the beginning, and that's created a really quick transition. Same thing if you wanted to go the other way. If you wanted to slow this down, you just pull this keyframe over here, and that's going to create a really slow transition into your next scene. Now, if you wanted to move this whole transition across, then all you need to do is just move the keyframes across into space, and that's just going to add that transition over here rather than at the beginning. Keyframe animation is such an important part of After Effects, and it's how you animate and create all these different animation sequences inside of Adobe After Effects. So understanding keyframe animation is an important part in learning After Effects. Now let's go and create some masks. So we're going to select this orange solid here, which has been made grey because of the adjustment layer, but we'll just keep it grey for now. Adjust this, select this orange solid. We're going to go up to the pen tool, and then I'm just going to draw a shape on this box here. And this is our mask. Now, as you can see, it's deleted everything outside of this mask and kept the solid inside of this mask here. So if we go over to this arrow on the orange solid and we go into masks, mask 1, we can create an animation sequence using our mask. So we'll drag this back to the very beginning. We'll go onto mask path and we'll create a brand new keyframe by selecting this stopwatch here. Now we'll scroll across 1 second and we're just going to slightly change that mask. So we're just going to go through and we're just going to change the shape of this. Perfect. Now if we scroll back to the very beginning, you'll notice that this animation has been created. The animation stops at the end here where there's this keyframe here. So if I wanted to slow this down, again, I would just extend this keyframe across and that's going to create a slower animation. That does stop quite harshly on that keyframe there. So if you wanted to kind of slowly end this animation, you can do so by double clicking this keyframe, going into keyframe assistant and pressing easy ease. Now that's just going to slowly transition into that end keyframe. So rather than harshly stopping, it's just going to like slowly feather the brakes on rather than quickly slamming the brakes on. So now if we wanted to progress this animation even further, we can do so by going across even further and creating another point. So we're just going to animate this again. Let's make a big long rectangle. And there you go. Now, as you can see, that animation was really quick, and that's because the distance between these two keyframes is much shorter than this distance here. This is a 3-second animation, and this is about half a second to a second animation. And now, as you can see, that disappeared because of the Venetian blinds effect we brought in on the adjustment layer over here. Now, let's say we don't want all of this to be in grey. We want to start off in full color, and then we want to transition down into this. So what I would do for that is I would adjust the opacity of the adjustment layer. So we go up to the adjustment layer. We're going to press this arrow here. We'll go down to transform, and we're going to go into opacity. Now we want to start in full color. So I'm going to start by going down to 0%, pressing the stopwatch here, scrolling across to around 5 seconds, and we'll pull that all the way up to 100%. Now, as you can see, that's brought in that adjustment layer and it's made everything black and white. So we'll pull this back to the beginning and we'll watch through this. Starting in full color, and as the animation progresses, the color is dying away, and now we're in full black and white. We've got the animation from this shape layer here. And then at the end of this animation, we've got the Venetian blinds pulling that video layer away. Perfect. So let's say you're super happy with this video and you want to go and export this. So from here, all you would need to do is File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Now this is going to load up this another menu here, and this is our render queue. And basically it means that we can render as many video layers and as many compositions as we want at the same time. So we could just queue up 20 videos, we could queue up 100 videos, we could just queue up one video and it would do them all at the same time. Now this is great because it means that you can do all of your exporting at once, which means you only have to leave your laptop running once, and this is going to save you a load of time when you're editing. So from here you want to go through into the render settings and press best settings. Now in here you can adjust your quality. So wireframe is like a really bad animation, draft is like a really low resolution, and best is the best settings. So I would always recommend sticking that on best. Resolution full. However, if you've got limited space or if you're only putting this onto a small platform, then by all means feel free to reduce this down to half, third or quarter. But I like to keep this on full because I love the quality. Everything else here is completely fine, so I'm just going to press OK. Okay, so next we have the output module, and to adjust this I'm going to go and press lossless. Now in the format, we can adjust our format to anything we want. So we can have a JPEG sequence, meaning we can have image sequence. We can have a Photoshop sequence. Again, that's an image sequence, but in Photoshop. We've got a PNG sequence, but we don't want any of that. So we want to select QuickTime. Now from here, we've got a load of different other menus. So we've got post-render action. Don't need to know about that yet. We've got our channels. Just keep this as RGB. Depth, millions of colors. All of this is fine. So we'll press OK. And lastly, we've got output to, and that is basically where you're going to output this video file to on your computer. So at the moment, this is pointing to the desktop and this is saving as AE, but I can rename this to whatever I think is appropriate. So I'm just going to call this After Effects Orange Square. And now I can just save this. And now from here, I can just go through and I can render this. And the computer is just going to go through and it's just going to render out this video, and it's going to take a few minutes just to sort this out and just export this into a video file. And that's it. That is the basics of Adobe After Effects. Now, I know this looks really complicated and there's all of these different menus, and believe me, I was the exact same at the very beginning stages. But with enough time and enough practice and enough YouTube videos studying the software, I promise you in next to no time you will know the software like the back of your hand, and you'll be able to create some amazing video effects. If you found this video useful at all, then please do let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see regular filmmaking and photography tutorials on this channel. Thank you ever so much for watching. I really do truly appreciate it. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.